Now, from the time, at least the time of Hobbes in the 17th century, it became evident that a society of sovereign selves, people who were essentially engines of desire and will, that would require a very powerful central authority in the state. And as the state gains more and more power, other institutions, other forms of social order and authority have to surrender to the state. And as the sovereign self and the sovereign state come to be seen as the only significant actors in society, then the choice between capitalism and socialism comes to be seen as the most fundamental economic issue. In modern society, science is assumed to provide the only reliable form of knowledge. Custom, tradition, imagination, or revelation may be privately of interest, but what they convey is not real knowledge of public significance. Religion is necessarily marginalized or privatized, and religiously grounded restraint on social life comes to be regarded as mere intolerance. After all, in the absence of any natural or divine law, eventually all value judgments come to be regarded as expressions of preference. Now, I want to sum up real quickly just a couple quotes from Stephen Margolin, that book I cited earlier, the Harvard economist who's written the book The Dismal Science, How Thinking Like an Economist Undermines Community. And early in the book, he lists 4 key assumptions of modernity that guide economists, and by extension, our economic life. And I'm only going to mention 2 of these now. And the first of these is individualism. I know Amy's going to talk about this tomorrow, and I hope you see how it's really central, the idea of this, it's really central to modern culture. The basic idea of individualism, Margolin writes, is that society can and should be understood as a collection of autonomous individuals, that groups, with the exception of the nation, have no normative significance, that all behavior, policy, and even ethical judgment should be reduced to their effect on individuals, not their effect on groups, not their effects on communities or families or extended families or churches. Now, because Margolin's principal concern is with the health of communities, with the health of human groupings that are smaller than the nation, he's particularly sensitive to the modern marriage of convenience between the autonomous modern self and the ever-expanding modern state. And he returns to this theme throughout the book. The economist's individual, he writes, is fixed and unchanging. He is a responsible actor at all times. His preferences are not up for discussion, evaluation, or analysis. Finally, he is self-interested in a particular narrow way. So this is a particular kind of individual. It's an individual that has fixed and unchanging preferences. It's an individual that has responsibility, but responsibility not in the sense of doing the right thing, but doing something, that is being an actual actor, of having agency, of choosing. And the preferences of individuals determine their choices and actions and behavior. The idea that preferences are beyond discussion implies a radical subjectivism. One set of preferences, Margolin writes, is as worthy as another for economists. Self-interest precludes acting for the sake of others, particularly acting for others out of a sense of duty or obligation. Margolin, by the way, argues throughout his book that while economists may claim to be merely objective and descriptive scientists, he believes that the discipline, by and large, embraces the rightness of this view of human nature. In other words, it's not that this is how we're just describing here. He believes that, as he puts it, economics celebrates the self-interested, calculating individual. Later he writes, economists seek to fashion a world in the image of economic theory. This is the way the world would be a lot neater if it conformed to our theory. Well, you can understand why they feel that way. They could predict everything if people behave this way. And they'd get more grant money. The problem with the idea, he writes, that economics is purely or even primarily a descriptive undertaking is that the apparatus of economics has been shaped by an agenda focused on showing that markets are good for people rather than on discovering how markets actually work. My argument with my fellow economists is not that they strike a different balance with respect to the gains and the losses of extending the sway of markets. It's that they do not recognize the losses at all. Now, I'm going to skip. We need to close. It's late. It's Friday night. I've been arguing tonight that Christians need to recognize systemic disorders in modern culture, and particularly in economic life. Tomorrow, Amy will look more closely at ways in which individualism informs that system and ways in which our own economic practices might be less individualistic. Behind both of our talks is a conviction that I think has been well described by theologian Peter Leithart, who's written that Christian community is not an extra religious layer on social life. The church is not a club for religious people. The church is a way of living together before God, a new way of being human together. What Jesus and the apostles proclaimed was not a new ideology or a new religion in our attenuated modern sense. What they proclaimed was salvation, and that meant a new human world, a new social and political reality. They claimed that God has established the eschatological order of human life in the midst of history, not perfectly, but truly. The church anticipates the form of the human race as it will be when it comes to maturity. She is the already of the new humanity that will be perfected in the not yet of the last day. Now, that's a vision for the church that I think is actually rare in American Christianity.